Good morning, everyone. Today we are going to discuss all about planning and scheduling. So the presenters are from Group 1, Porcy, Russell Joy Macunat, Zaira Faith Carbiliedo, and Bea M. Mulato. So the topic coverages are number 1, construction planning. Second is the project planning. Third is the project scheduling and control techniques. Lastly is defining precedence relationships among activities. So in a construction project success relies heavily upon a well-thought and a comprehensive planning, whether it is a small-scale or large-scale projects. So, kung kaya't nararapat lang na pagtuunan ng pansin ang isang pagpaplano at pag-i-schedule sa isang project. So, let us first define planning and scheduling. So, what is planning? Planning primarily deals selecting the appropriate policies and procedures in order to achieve the objectives of the project. So, in short, it determines kung ano at magkano ang mga gagamitin sa isang project or para ma-push ang isang project. So next, what is scheduling? It converts the project action plans for scope, time, cost, and quality into an operating timetable. So, if planning talks about what and how, scheduling on the other hand talks about who and when. This defines kung kailan mag-ooperate ang isang project. Let's say, mag-schedule sila kung kailan nila i-operate yung isang roadway construction or construction of houses, and dito rin tatalakayin kung sino or mga sino ang mag-ooperate ng project na yun. So, let's say, for example is, as a Masacute member, I am a Masacute member in our barangay, and syempre, may mga plano kaming pinupush para magkaroon kami ng mga activities na needed sa isang organization. So, ayan, since pandemic, wala kami mga face-to-face interactions with our members. But then, yung president namin, dun siya mayroon kaming GC, and dun siya nagre-rely ng mga message niya kung ano yung mga kailangan namin gawin. So, tulad nga nung nakaraang taon, nagkaroon kami ng isang main project. So, paano na-involve yung planning and scheduling doon? So, since sinabi sa planning kanina na planning talks about on what and how question. So, sa planning, nag-chat siya sa amin. So, sinabi niya sa amin na magagawa kami ng isang project na to. So, nag-allocate siya ng pondo para ma-push yung project na kailangan naming ma-come up. So, related siya dun sa how much and kung paano gagawin ang isang project. So, sa scheduling naman, so since nagkaroon na siya ng pagpaplano, in-schedule naman niya kung kailan gagawin at kung sino yung mga attend. So, ayan, yung sa planning and scheduling. So, although planning and scheduling are different processes, they come together in an operation to achieve or to reach the company's or project's desired goal. So, let's move on to construction planning. Construction planning is a fundamental and challenging activity in the management and the execution of construction projects. A good construction plan is the basis for developing the budget and the schedule for work. It also involves the choice of technology, the definition of work tasks, the estimation of the required resources and durations for individual tasks, and the identification also of any interaction among the work tasks. So, developing the construction plan is a critical task in management even if a plan is not written or otherwise formally recorded. So, yeah. In addition, technical aspects in construction's planning always takes place. Technical aspects, which means dito mai-involve yung mga decision making within an organization. So, necessary talaga na gumawa ng mga organizational decisions pag mayroon kang projects na ipopropose or i-construct, kasi dito magkakaroon ng mga decisions sa pagitan ng mga involved na tao or involved na organizations or kung anong organizations pa ba yung may involved dun sa isang project na to. So, halimbawa na lang is being a subcon. So, kunwari, sa isang project may nag-subcon. Siyempre, mapapag-usapan sa construction planning na yun kung hanggang saan or kung ano yung lawak ng subkontratista ang gagamitin sa isang project. I mean, kung halimbawa, yung mapapag-usapan sa construction planning yung lawak na kung saan ang mga subcontractor is gagamitin sa isang project. Kumbaga, may limitation din sila kung hanggang saan yung kanilang involvement dun sa isang project na yun. So, forming a construction plan is a highly challenging task. As Holmes noted, most people, if you describe a train of events to them, will tell you what the result would be. They can put those events together in their minds and argue from them that something will come to pass. There are few people, however, who, if you told them a result, would be able to evolve from their own inner consciousness what the steps were which led up to that result. So, dito ay kanyang inihayag ang kanyang saloobin in regards with pagpaplano or in regards in planning, in which he described two different insights of a person, different processes of planning by a person on how to improve and achieve a specific goal. So, next, let's move on to the essential aspects of construction planning. If it talks about the generation of required activities, it is all about the generation. So it also includes who, when, how much, and when will it started or when the project will end. So yan. Next is the analysis. Analyzing implications of the said activities. So when the required activities or when the plan has been generated by the contractor or by the implementer of that project, they will move forward to the analyzations of implications. So, ano ba yung mga possible maging implication ng project na yon kapag natayo na or habang tinatayo or before tinatayo. Then, after that is the choice. Choice is the alternative means of performing the activities. So, the last aspect in construction planning is a choice, which is the alternative means of performing the activities. So, it is important to have an alternative always so that the project can run smoothly. Say for example, sa isang equipment. Nag-stick ka lang sa isang equipment na yun ang gagamitin without any choices, without any alternatives. So, the project is mawawala siya, mapipending yung project na yun kasi magre-rely ka lang dun sa isang equipment. So, if there are so many alternatives or choices of equipments and materials to be used, walang magiging hindrance or walang magiging sagabal doon sa pagpaplano and doon sa paggawa ng project or doon sa pag-operate or pag-construct ng isang project kasi meron kang choice, may alternative ka doon sa isang problem, may alternative solution ka. Kasi importante din talaga na may choice or alternatives kang i-consider para matapos yung isang project within the time frame. Okay. So, in developing a so here is the diagram of construction planning. So, in developing construction plan, it is common to adopt a primary emphasis on either cost control or schedule control as illustrated in this figure. So, ang mga ibang projects is normally divided into expense categories with associated in cost construction planning. So, it can be cost or expense oriented. So, yun daw, ang isang construction may be cost or expense oriented. So, within the categories of expenditure, a distinction between costs incurred directly in the accomplishment of the project and directly for the project. So, under the cost-oriented, we have two. Under of it is the direct cost, also known as a project overhead cost. So, it is directly linked to the physical construction of the project. So, let's say, for example, materials, labor, and equipment. So, yung mga, kung magkano yung materials na gagamitin, yung mga equipments, something na mga ganun. And the other one is the indirect costs, also known as the overhead expenses. So, example naman yan is the rent and the utilities. So, indirect costs are necessary to keep a process of a project or to keep project running. So, for example, in indirect costs, for example is borrowing expenses for project financing. Para magkaroon ka ng finances doon sa isang project, syempre, hindi naman maiwasan yun. Talagang magbabaro ka. So, that is considered as indirect cost. So, for other projects, scheduling of work activities over time is critical and is emphasized in the planning process, kung kaya't ang isang planner has to ensure the proper precedences in the project or in the activities. So, under the schedule-oriented, we have two, the critical path and the job shop scheduling. So, critical path is the minimum length of time required to complete a project, while on the other hand, job shop is strict orders of all operations to be performed. So, traditional scheduling procedure emphasize the maintenance of task precedences or efficient use of resources over time. So, let's talk about the critical path. So, critical path is the duration of the critical path represents the minimum length of time required to complete a project. So, say for example, a project consists of two parallel activities. Two parallel activities meaning dalawang activities taken simultaneously. So, it requires that yung two parallel projects daw na yun requires 3 days to complete. So, it would have each activity critical para ma-complete or ma-accomplish yung both project na yon within that 3 days. So, next is the job scheduling. Sa job scheduling naman, compared to critical path, there is a strict order of all operations to be performed on all of the jobs. Okay. So, next is the functional requirements for construction planning. So, we shall consider functional requirements such as work breakdown or the technology choice. As in development of appropriate alternatives for facility design, choices of appropriate technology must be considered. So, a parallel step in the planning process is to define the various work tasks that must be accomplished. The term work tasks are often used interchangeably in construction plans to refer to specific items of work. So it's all about the work breakdown. And what I have said earlier is all about the technology choice. So sa pagse-select ng isang alternative method and technologies, karaniwan na ang isang nagpaplano is nagpo-formulate siya ng numerous number of construction plan depende sa alternatives methods and their assumptions. So, once na magkaroon na ng full plan or the final plan, what we call the final plan, ng isang proyekto, then the cost, time, and reliability can be reviewed prior to that alternative yon. Okay. So, this is a picture of Pittsburgh roadway rehabilitation. This picture, so bakit ko siya pinlay? So, this picture is an example of the importance of good constructions planning and the effect of technology choice. So, ayan. So, sa project na ito, overpass as well as pavement of roadway itself should be replaced. So, yun daw yung unang plano. Ang unang plano daw dito is to work outward from each end of the overpass habang yung highway daw sa ibaba ay inapaltan. But since then, the access of equipment is become considerable, lalo na dun sa pagdating daw dun sa overpass, and however daw, and so para daw masolusyonan yun kasi daw naging considerable problem daw yung pag-transport ng mga equipment doon sa taas. Parang naging hassle daw. So with that, nagpump na laang daw sila ng concrete from the highway below up to the overpass itself. So ilan lang yun sa mga example ng success construction or rehabilitation na nakagamit ng effective construction planning and as well as technology choice. So ayan. Let's move on to the work breakdown structure. It is a method of breaking down a project into individual elements, such as components, subcomponents, activities, and tasks in a hierarchical structure which can be scheduled and cost. It also defines tasks that can be completed independently of other tasks, facilitating resource allocation, assignment of responsibilities, and measurement and control of the project. On the other hand, it is developed before identification of dependencies and estimation of activity durations, and it can be used to identify the task in the CPM and PERT. So, it is deliverable-oriented breakdown of project into smaller components. Kung baga, yung isang project is general to specific. Parang ginagawa nating specific yung isang plano. So, ito, may example dito. So, as you can see in the figure, so, example yan ng work breakdown structure. Kung makikita nyo naman, from the general project, which is the landscape project, nagkaroon pa siya ng mga components, and yung components na yon nagkaroon pa siya ng mga subcomponents or ng galamay or under pa siya. So, ayan. Siyempre, di ba, sa isang project, kunwari, let's say na nangontrata yung isang tao, kunwari nga yan, landscape project, sabihin na natin yung landscape project, kinontrata ng tao na yun, siyempre, bago siya magpunta or bago niya i-pursue yung project na yun, siyempre, hahanap muna siya ng mga tauhan na gagawa nun, yung mga laborers, and of course, the materials to be used para ma-pursue yung project. So, hindi naman, kunwari, let's say na nakakuha na siya ng mga tauhan. Hindi naman, nakakuha na siya ng mga tauhan. Pagpunta niya doon sa mismong project area, project location, is mag-uumpisa na agad sila without planning. So, bago syempre pumunta yun doon, yung kontratista na yun, minake sure na niya na mayroong magandang planning about dun sa pagla-landscape na yon. And ito nga, example nga yun ng work breakdown structure or the WBS. So, landscape project, kung makikita nyo, may tatlo pa siyang naging components. So, number 1 is design home landscape. Design home landscape, meaning, dyan papasok ang mga designing, yung mga, syempre, may mga alternatives pa dyan na papasok kung anong design. O, design 1, design 2, design 3, something like that. Kung alin doon yung mapili, yun yung ipuput into a lawn. So, pag naput na siya sa lawn, so, bago naman, syempre, inputting it in a lawn, kailangan mag-acquire ng lawn material. Mga panghukay, ganun, pang-alis ng lupa, mga ganun. Then, after mo syempreng makapaghukay na or makahanap na ng isang lawn, importante din syempre to install in sprinkler system. So, paano ka mag-install ng sprinkler system kung dun pala sa lugar walang tubig, di ba? Walang source. So, under the install a sprinkler system, so the very first thing to do is to identify a sprinkler location. So, ayan nga yung sinasabi ko. Yung mas malapit or mas malakas na source ang kailangan nating hanapin. After we identify the sprinkler locations. We should dig trenches. And pag nakapag-dig na tayo ng trenches, doon na tayo mag-install ng pipe and hardware na gagamitin dun sa landscape na project. So, after that, last na gagawin is to cover the sprinkler system. Kasi nga, di ba, baka mapasukan ng mga ibang material, ibang debris, ganyan. So, after na magkaroon ka ng mag-install ng sprinkler system, doon na papasok yung pagtatanim, plant grass or plant shrubs, anything. So, in doing that, we should first make sure na malinis yung pagtatamnan natin. Walang mga ibang materials na unnecessary things doon sa place na yon. So, removing debris. Then, after malinis yun, syempre, we have to prepare our soil. For example, pulverize natin siya. Dig-dig lang, ganyan. Pulverize hanggang sa gumanda yung lupa. Then, after magkaroon or ma-prepare na yung soil, there is a time na para mag-plant tayo ng seed sa lawn natin. So, the last thing to do, kung syempre, hindi naman siya necessary, pero kung gusto lang, build a fence. So, tulad ng tatanim dun sa unang gagawin na put into a lawn, kailangan magkaroon tayo ng mga material. O ano ba ang mga material na gagamitin sa pag-fencing, pagbabakod. So, for example, yung bakod na gagamitin mo ay made of kawayan. So, ayan, mga pako, pamputol lang kawayan, or mga nylon, pangtali, ganon. So, we should acquire fence material. And then, pag may material na tayo, syempre, makakapag-construct na tayo ng fence. So, how to construct a fence? First is mark fence line and post. So, in order for the fence to be equally equal and with the appropriate height and sizes, okay? And then, after that, ma-install na natin siya, matatayo na natin siya, and then, kung may mga gusto pang idagdag, pwedeng gawa ng gate yung landscape area, or pinturahan yung mga kawayan, yung mga bamboo fences, ganun. So, yan yung sinasabi sa work breakdown structure. Kumbaga, yung isang pagpaplano is from general to very specific na pagpaplano para mas lalong maintindihan or mas maisagawa ng maayos. So, for example, syempre, isa construction ng bahay, di ba? Before constructing a house, papasok dyan yung sa mga excavation. So, bago ka pa mag-excavate, syempre, yung design yan, yung plano ng bahay, ipiprepare yan. Syempre, bago ka naman mag-dig or bago ka mag-excavate, we have to make sure na mayroon yung permits galing municipal or barangay, ganun, yung mga building permits. So, pag nakapag-building permits ka na, pwede ka na mag-excavate, then proceed ka na sa construction. Kapag sa mga roadway construction naman, mga bidding pa, procurement, processes, mga ganun. Pero pag sa simpleng pag-construct lang ng bahay, doon papasok na yung mga excavation, internal and external construction, mga electrical works, masonry works, ganyan. Doon ini-specify nila yung mga subcomponents ng mismong project na gagawin in order for the contractor, in order for the owner, or in order for the client to understand more or understand better the overall project and the overall project's purpose. So, next is the project planning, resource availability and or its limits. So, next is the due date, late penalties, early completion, incentives, budget. And sama na rin natin dyan yung activity information, identify all required activities, estimate the resources required, the time to complete each activity, immediate predecessors to each activity needed to create. So, project planning is a part of a project management. It is a discipline addressing how to complete a project in a certain time frame, usually with defined stages and designated resources. So, what are the components of project plan. Contain siya ng tatlo. Number 1, scope. Number 2, budget. And number 3 is the timeline. So, scope, it will tackle some questions like, what are the required activities? What should be the do's and don'ts? So, what are the required activities? Diyan, papasok yung pagpaplano. What is the scope of the project? What is the objectives of the project? What should be done in the project and what shouldn't be done in the project? So, yan. Next is the budget. What manpower resources will be required? So, project managers look at what manpower resources will be required to meet the specific goal or to meet the desired goal of a certain project. Kasi, diba, without having a proper budget or enough allocation in the project, hindi naman siya maisa sa katuparan or else matitiwangwang lang yung mga projects. Kumbaga, masasayang lang yung nasimulan kung you don't have enough budget para matapos yung project na yun. And then, next is the timeline. So, what is the expected date to complete the activities? Yan agad ang tanong. Kasi importante yan. It reveals the length of time expected to complete each phase of the project. Kasi, di ba, kunwari, ang kontrata mo lang, 1.5 years. Tapos, pag malapit ka na sa 1.5 years, hindi pa tapos yung project mo, magkakaroon yan ng penalty or else, iiwanan na lang yung project kasi ang kontrata mo lang 1.5 years. So, as a contractor or as a manager of a project, kailangan maging maingat tayo dun sa time frame ng ating paggawa ng project. Okay. So, project scheduling and construction technique is also a part of project management that involves listing of activities, milestones, and deliverables within a project. So, ayan, kasi 'di ba, sa isang pagpaplano ng mga proyekto, kinakailangan meron talaga tayong mga basis or yung pagbabasehan ng ating mga gagawin or ng ating mga activities. At yan, sample niyan is the Gantt chart and the critical path method or the CPM to be discussed by my groupmate, Zaira Faith Carballiedo.
Hello, this is Zaira Faith Carballiedo speaking, the reporter 2 from the Group 1. And to further explain the given project scheduling and control techniques, let me show you this presentation. So alam ko na familiar na kayo dito sa kaunahan. Let me give you a hint. Nagawa at nagamit na natin ito sa ating capstone project. Alin kaya ito? Ito ay, yes, ang Gantt chart. So, a Gantt chart is a graph or bar chart with a bar for each project activity that shows passage of time. It provides visual display of project schedule. Gamit na gamit daw ito sa project management at 'di ba tulad ng nasabi ko kanina, nagamit na din natin ito para mapakita yung sequence ng mga activities natin sa CE project. So, this is an example of Gantt chart. And to give you a brief history, noong 1910, si Henry Grant na isang management consultant at engineer ay nag-devise ng bagong uri ng chart na nagpapakita hindi lamang ng kung kailan matatapos ang task, napapakita din daw ng chart na ito yung start at end timeline sa bawat task. At ngayong modern times, napapakita na din daw ng chart na ito ang interdependencies of tasks, na highlight na din lahat ng involved sa project at ano ang dapat na matapos bago magsimula ang iba pa. Ayan, this explains why Gantt chart is called the Gantt chart. It is because it was made and developed by Henry Gantt. So, let's move on to the next one. So, andito na tayo sa kasunod. Alam kong familiar na din kayo dito. Ito ay ang PERT or CPM. So, ang meaning daw ng PERT ay Project Evaluation Review Technique at sa CPM naman ay Critical Path Method. So, itong dalawang ito ay it is a control tool for defining the parts of construction job and then putting them together in a network form. It serves as an aid to the project manager, but it does not make decision for him, nor does it guarantee good management. It only serves the project manager to see the whole picture of the entire job. So, tulad ng sinabi, tinutulungan lang nito na mapakita sa manager yung kabuuang picture. Kasi nga pinagsasama-sama nito yung parts ng construction job, pero syempre yung manager pa rin ang mag-input ng data at mag-desisyon in the end, right? Di naman ito tao or robot na nakaprogram to make decision. Diagram lang ho ito. But ano naman ang difference ng dalawa? So ayan. Ang PERT ay ginagamit daw para mag-manage ng uncertain activities. Ano ba yung example ng uncertain activities? Ito ay, halimbawa, kung may activity na hindi ninyo alam kung kailan matatapos or undefined ang time, ayan, uncertain activity yan. So, sa CPM naman, ginagamit lang ang CPM para mag-manage ng certain activities. Ano ba ang certain activities? Siyempre, yun yung kabaliktaran ng uncertain. E di dapat kung gagamit ka ng CPM, dapat sigurado yung activity mo. Halimbawa, alam dito yung time. So, ang PERT daw sa number 2 ay event-oriented. Meaning, ang network daw na ito ay na-construct na nababase sa event. Sa CPM naman, the activity. Tapos number 3, PERT majorly focuses on time, while CPM majorly focuses on time-cost trade-off. And ito ang example ng PERT at ito naman sa kaliwa ay ang CPM. Ayan. Bago tayo dumako sa phases, magbalik tanaw muna tayo kaya sa nakaraan. Konting istorya muna tungkol sa PERT or CPM. So, ito ang key points tungkol sa history ng PERT. So, bakit nakalagay dito ang US Navy? Kasi, ang PERT daw ay unang na-develop ng US Navy kasama syempre ng mga contractors na nagtatrabaho sa Polaris Missile Program noong 1958. Ito ay na-develop dahil merong binubuong nuclear arsenal ang Soviet Union, and the US government wanted to complete the Polaris project as quickly as possible. So, the Navy used PERT to coordinate the efforts of some 3,000 contractors involved with the project. Kailan mo yun, ang dami. Pero nagawang i-manage ng PERT. Experts credited PERT with shortening the project duration by 2 years. So, since then, all government contractors have been required to use PERT or a similar project analysis technique for all major government contracts. So, ayan, kaya itong pangalawa, kaya napabilis ang project within 2 years na involved dito ang multiple task time estimates. So, ito namang pangatlo, yung activity on arrow network construction, ay madidiscuss ko pa later on. And yung non-repetitive jobs, ibig sabihin, hindi na paulit-ulit, kaya nga may scheduling, 'di ba? Hindi na maliit na yung chance na may maulit kung sakali man. So, let's move on sa critical path method. At ito ang key points ng critical path method. So, ang critical path method daw, ayon sa ibang source, ay dinevelop daw ng DuPont Company. Tapos sa iba naman, edi ito, E.I. DuPont de Nemours and Co. noong 1957. Ayan, the critical path method was developed at the DuPont Company in 1957 by a pair of mathematicians who were looking at ways to avoid the cost of plant shutdowns and restarts caused by inefficient rescheduling. So, parang medyo kahawig nung PERT. Their research showed that money could be saved by focusing efforts on performing the right tasks at the right times, rather than flooding the problem with labor to stay on schedule. So, yung research daw, patunayan daw ng research na mas mapapabilis yung task sa pamamagitan ng right scheduling, yung paggawa ng pagtapos ng certain task sa certain time, hindi yung basta-basta lamang na magadagdag ng tauhan na which in turn magiging magastos nga naman. So, this saved DuPont 25% on shutdowns, and James Kelly and Morgan Walker published the first paper on their findings in 1959. Ironically, DuPont then dropped the CPM system when the management team responsible for it changed. So, drop din daw pala ito nung nag-change yung management team. Kaya, ayan. So, ito yung start. The deterministic task times, katulad nung nabanggit ko kanina. Itong activity on node network construction ay matatakal ko pa mamaya. Repetitive nature of jobs. So, unlike dun sa nauna, meron daw itong repetitive nature of jobs. Hindi naman kasi nabanggit na napaprevent nito yung pag ulit-ulit. Kasi nga, 'di ba? Kokonti lang yung labor. So, ayan. At ano naman kaya? Ilan or ano kaya ang mga phases nito? Meron ba kayong idea? Ayan, meron daw tayong 3 phases ng PERT CPM. Namely, the planning, scheduling, and control monitor. So, ang planning, syempre, yan yung kaunahan sa mga phases. Ang ina-involve nito ay yung pag-set ng objectives ng project, yung pag-identify din syempre ng mga activities na kailangang i-perform, at yung pag-alam ng mga requirement na halimbawa yung mga resources tulad ng men, materials, machines, at iba pa. Tapos, yung cost and time din daw ng mga activities ay na-estimate na dito. And yung network diagram daw ay na-develop na nagpapakita ng pagkakasunod-sunod ng mga interrelationships between various activities during the planning stage. Ayan. So, sa number 2 naman, yung kasunod ng planning, which is scheduling. So, base dun sa time estimate na nagawa ni planning, ito daw scheduling ang nagaset ng start at finish times para sa bawat activity na magagawa daw by applying forward and backward pass techniques. Critical path is identified then, along with the slack and float for the non-critical paths. So, ang kahulihan, which is control monitor, ay ito na yung nagagawa kapag natapos na yung scheduling. So, ang ina-refer daw ng control ay yung pag-analyze at pag-evaluate ng actual progress na against the plan. So, may plano na, edi ginagawa nyo na, tinitingnan nyo yung progress, tapos kinukumpara ninyo dun sa plano na nakasulat dun sa papel. Reallocation of resources, crashing and review of projects with periodical reports are carried out. Ayan, natapos na tayo sa phases. Ano naman ang kasunod? So, let's move on sa last but not the least, yung project network. Ayon sa aking nabasa, ang project network daw ay tinatawag ding project activity network. So, ito daw ay graphical depiction na halos napakaparehas sa flowchart na nagpapakita ng pagkakasunod-sunod ng project's terminal elements na kailangang matapos. So, ito ang example. O, diba, mukha siyang flowchart. So, bawat terminal element daw nito, ayan, terminal element nakalagay, ay nag-represent ng mga activity that yung mga activity ito ay nag-relate sa work package at the lowest level of the work breakdown structure or WBS. Tandaan nyo pa yung WBS, yung in-explain kanina ni Miss Makunat, yung pagkatapos ng construction planning. However, whereas the WBS does not attempt, o yung WBS daw ay hindi nag-identify ng sequence of events or yung tagal ng mga activity. Pero sa project network daw, na ga-identify daw ito ng sequence ng activities at ng iba pang activities. Ayan, yun yung pagkakaiba ng project network at WBS. Ayan. So, baka naman nag-explain ako din tapos medyo clueless pa rin kayo tungkol sa mga terms na mga inagamit ko. Like activities and elements, ganun. So, this section is for you. So, ito, napapaloob dito sa terms and their uses, yung mga keys at mga symbols na nagagamit sa project network. So, ang kaunahan dito ay ang activity, which is self-explanatory naman, diba? Kasi nga, activity. A task or a certain amount of work required in the project requires time to complete at ito daw ay narepresenta ng arrow. So, mapapakita ko pa yan mamaya. Next one is the dummy activity na nag-indicate only ng precedence ng relationships. Alam mo yung precedence, yung napapangunahan, yung nangunguna. Ayan. It does not require any time of effort. So, nasabi ko din na parang ito, nabasa ko din na parang ito yung invisible activity dun sa scheduling. Ayan. Event. So, yung event daw yung nag-signal ng pagsisimula or pagtatapos ng mga activity. ito daw yung nagde-designate ng point in time. At ito naman ay nare-representa ng circle or node. Ayan. So, network. Ito namang network ang nagpapakita ng pagkakasunod-sunod ng relationships among activities using nodes and arrows naman. Ayan. Ito naman yung symbols, arrows. An arrow leads from tail to head directionally. Ito yung tail at ito yung head. Ang arrow daw ay nag-indicate ng activity. So, whereas yung activity, di ba nasabi kanina na ito yung a time-consuming effort that is required to perform a part of the work. So, a node naman ay nare-representa sa pamamagitan ng circle. Nag-indicate naman daw ito ng event. A point in time where one or more activities start and or finish. Ayan. So, meron daw tayong dalawang methods ng project network at ito ay ang pang-una ay activity on node. So, ang palatandaan lang dito ay yung node ang nag-represent ng activity. Tapos, yung arrows ay nagpakita ng precedence relationships. Ito ang example. Ayan. Yung node at saka yung arrows, paki-take note. Ito naman ang kasunod. Yung activity on arrow naman ang nagpapakita ng activities at nodes naman para sa events for points in time. Ayan. At ito ang example. Hindi pa bilis. Importance. So, hindi ito kasama sa guide pero I think maganda itong overview para sa masunod na topic. So, ang importance daw nito ay nakakatulong daw ito para malaman kung ano yung pinakang logical na sequence, yung pagkakasunod-sunod ng events para sa project. And provides the basis of a realistic schedule. So, very similar ito kung natatandaan ninyo yung isang lesson natin sa transportation. Yung nagde-determine ng shortest path na sinasolve. Although, merong madaming daan papunta dun sa yung puntahan. Makikita mo pa rin na merong pinakang short test path na siguro syempre mas convenient para sa drivers, less sa gas at less sa time. So, ayan. Tapos, it will enable you din daw para makalculate yung total amount of time required for the project. Kasama din pala ito doon. Tapos, nade-define din daw nito yung order kung alin yung, syempre, yung mauuna dun sa mga task. Kung alin yung mahuhuli, kung alin yung kasunod, ganon. At na-highlight din daw nito yung task na yung critical para sa project schedule. So, malaki pala talagang importance ng project network. At, very similar itong scenario ito dun sa, alam nyo ba yung project sa Cebu na tulay? Yung tulay na ginawa magkabilang side at napagdesisyonan nilang pagmitin sa gitna. So, siguro gumamit din sila ng project network dito kasi ayun, hindi naman siya pangkaraniwang ginagawa yung pagdudugsongin. At diba, kung napapansin ninyo nung mga sinaunang construction site, talagang nagsisimula sila from the bottom, pero ngayon napapagsabay na nila yung paggawa sa bottom at saka sa top, napapag-meet nila sa bandang halfway. So, tinitingnan nila dito kung alin yung mga mauuna, kung alin yung pwedeng pagsabayin para sa less time, at syempre, less hassle. And that ends my discussion. Yung solvings para sa project network ay madidiscuss na ng next reporter. Thank you.
Situations in network diagram, concurrent activities, defining precedence relationships among activities. Situations in network diagram. What is a network diagram? Network diagrams are a graphical portrayal of the activities and events of a project. They show how each activity relates to others in the project, the sequence of activities, and the need to perform some task before others. Networks also facilitate the determination of impact of early or late starts or finishes, provide information about the allocation of resources, and allow managers to do what-if analysis. With this information, managers may view the status of the plan, analyze progress, and evaluate alternatives. Shown in here are 4 types of situations in a network diagram. For the first figure, kinakailangang matapos muna ang task A before you can even proceed to task B or task C. Meaning to say, if A isn't done yet, task B and C would seem impossible. A certain example is on building a house. Kailangan meron ka munang plano bago ka makapagsimula sa construction o sa pagbili ng materials. Kung walang plano, then how can you even proceed with building? The second type involves 3 activities too. For this situation, task A and B must first be finished before you can proceed to C. Failing to finish both A and B will make it impossible to do task C. The third type shows the relationship of 4 activities wherein task A and B must occur before C and D. And lastly, a situation wherein an activity involves 2 important processes. Kung ating titingnan, dapat matapos muna ang A bago makapagsimula sa B. However, kailangan mo ring i-consider ang A bago ka makapagsimula sa D. We can see na walang direct connection ang C sa A and B, pero simply finishing C wouldn't make you capable of performing D without first finishing A. Concurrent activities. So when we say concurrent, it is operating or occurring at the same time. Concurrent activities is when the nature of work allows for more than one activity to be accomplished at the same time. An example showing concurrent activities is when you are working on your laptop. Pwede kang gumawa ng documents sa word processor while playing music and at the same time downloading files. So here it is shown 2 types of representation for 2 activities, which are laying foundation and ordering material. The first one directly showed the 2 activities connected with 2 arrows, which made it look like they'll arrive at the same event. The second one is correctly shown by placing a dummy activity to link the 2 processes. So what is a dummy activity? A dummy activity is actually an activity added to a project schedule as a placeholder. It is intended to show a path of action in a project or activity diagram and is employed when a logical relationship between 2 activities cannot be linked by showing the use of arrows linking one activity to another. Defining precedence relationships among activities. So, precedence relations between activities signify that the activities must take place in a particular sequence. It can be illustrated by a network or graph in which activities are represented by arrows. The most common precedence relationship is when one activity cannot start until another activity has finished. In most schedules, this is the relationship that exists in almost all cases. It is referred to as finish to start relationship. A network diagram is depicted by chart with nodes and their relationships. An arrow connects two nodes to represent an active relationship. So arrows are called branches or links in the activity network, while the circles marking the beginning or the end of each arrow are called nodes or events. This is an example of set of 4 activities with precedences. The activities are excavating the trench, placing framework, placing reinforcing, and then pouring concrete. As we can see, we should first finish excavating the trench before we can place the framework. The same goes for the consequent activities. Hindi pwedeng mauna yung pag-pour ng concrete bago yung excavating ng trench. So, meron ding mga mistakes to be avoided when making a precedence diagram. First, a circle of activity precedences will result in an impossible plan. For the example shown, if activity A precedes activity B, and activity B precedes activity C, and activity C precedes activity A, then the project can never be started or completed. Magiging mukha siyang cycle wherein paulit-ulit yung mga processes. Ibig sabihin, walang clear na sinabi kung alin yung end at alin ang start. Forgetting a necessary precedence relationship can be more insidious. For example, suppose that installation of drywall should be done prior to floor finishing. Ignoring this precedence relationship may result in both activities being scheduled at the same time. It is important to realize that different types of precedence relationships can be defined and that each has a different implications for the schedule of activities. So let's go for example. Here we are given the precedence definition for site preparation and foundation work, wherein the activities, the description, and the predecessors are presented in a table. So this is a total of 9 activities. So, as we can see, kailangan muna nating matapos ang site clearing before makapag-proceed tayo sa general excavation and then the grading of the general area. Removal of trees, which is B, and then the general excavation naman, ay kinakailangan muna natin matapos before we can proceed with E, which is excavation for utility trenches, and then the placing of formwork and reinforcement for concrete. Grading general area and excavation for utility trenches must be finished before installing the sewer lines and the other utilities. And lastly, kailangan ay may formwork ka na at nakapag-install ka na ng sewer lines before ka magbuhos ng concrete. So, to present this in a precedence relation, ganito ang mangyayari. Pwede siyang i-present through dalawa, which is the activity on branch representation and then the activity on node representation. So, for the activity on branch representation, so the start there ay yung 0 ang mag-mark as start. Then you go with A, process A, which is the site clearing. And then after A, you can proceed with the general excavation or the removal of trees, and then so on and so forth. So for the activity on node representation, the only difference is that you provide a start and the end nodes, and that nodes were actually where the activities were placed. For the activity on branch representation naman, the activities are placed on the arrows. So these are actually two types of network diagrams. So the activity on branch representation is also called the arrow diagramming method or the ADM. And the activity on node representation is also called the precedence diagramming method, or the PDM. In activity on arrow diagrams, arrows are used to show activities, and nodes are called events. First node is always the start event, and the last node is the end event. For the activity on brush representation shown, the start event is actually the node marked as 0, and the end event is the node marked as 5. On the other hand, on the activity on node diagrams, activities are shown on the node. While on the activity on node, you can see that the activities are placed on the node, which is represented by circles, and then a separate node for the start and end are indicated. Next, we'll go on a network example. So for the network example, we are given the table representing the activity, the point which each point precedes, and the expected time of days for work. So we are asked to draw the precedence diagram, find the critical path, and determine the expected duration of the project. So let's first go with drawing the precedence diagram. So by drawing the precedence diagram, use the circles and then arrows. So you first start with A, then A is connected to C and B because C and B precedes A. The same goes for the other points. Then the time spent were shown accompanying the letters indicated on the arrows. So we are asked to find the critical path. But what is the critical path? In project management, the critical path is the longest sequence of a task that must be completed to successfully conclude a project from the start to finish. The tasks on the critical path are known as critical activities because if they are delayed, the whole project will be delayed. So, for this type of network example, in order to conclude the project, we can actually go with 4 paths, mainly the ACDIJ path, the ABIJ path, EFJ, and then the GHK. So, how can we compute for the total number of days spent on each path? So for the ACDIJ, we just have to add the days indicated per activity, which is 4 plus 12, and then plus 2, 12, and 9, which gives us 39. For ABIJ, we'll have 4 plus 5 plus 12 plus 9, which is equal to 30, and then EFJ, which is 3 plus 8 plus 9, which is equal to 20, and then GHK, which is 1 plus 3 plus 15, which is equal to 19. So since the critical path suggested that it should be the longest sequence of tasks, we can therefore conclude that the critical path is path ACDIJ because it has 39 days, which is by far the highest number in compared to the other paths. So the project duration is 39 days.